What if events went differently, and Harry Osborn, not Peter Parker, was bitten by the radioactive spider? Welcome back, fellow watchers of the multiverse. I'm Max Charlebois, and today we finally continue one of the longest running multiverse sagas on the channel. This is the return of a fan favorite tale, one that began over 4 or 5 years ago, where destiny rewrote itself in Sam Raimi Spider-Man's universe, and Harry Osborn became the web-slinger hero of New York. Last time everything changed, Morlun, the devourer of Spider-Totems, appeared and broke through the walls of the Raimiverse, teleporting into this alternate timeline where Harry Osborn took Peter's place. With no Peter Parker to stand in his way, Morlun has set his sights on a new prey, Harry, the Spider-Man who never was meant to be. And now we pick up where we left off. This long-lost storyline is finally back, and this time we're finishing it. Whether we call it Part 7 or not, this is the next chapter in a Spider-Verse epic that's been years in the making. As always, Spider-Man Week continues strong, with videos, merch drops, motion comic campaigns, and community-powered what-ifs. If you've been here since the start of the story, thank you. If you're new, welcome to a fan-made timeline unlike any other. Let's close this chapter together. This is What If Harry Osborn got bitten by the radioactive spider? And now it's time to finish what we started. Let the multiverse unfold. The story of Harry Osborn as Spider-Man was never meant to be written. Not by destiny, not by fate, not even by the freak accident that set Peter Parker's life on a path of loss and sacrifice. The spider had leapt for Peter, that much was certain. But Harry, the boy born with a silver spoon and a poisoned inheritance, had stepped into its line. The bite came not from courage, but from accident. What followed, however, had been nothing short of defiance. The first year had been chaos. He learned to crawl before he learned to swing, and he learned to bleed before he learned to heal. He faced the Green Goblin without ever knowing it was his own father under the mask. Not until the bombs had fallen and the truth had crawled out of Norman's mouth like a confession too late to matter. Harry carried his body from the fight, a broken silhouette against the firelight, and from that night on the name Osborn was not a birthright, it was a curse. Spider-Man was no longer just a hero, he was an atonement. Year 2 brought Otto Octavius, the mentor who became the monster. Harry fought him atop the sunlit skeleton of a fusion reactor, the city's fate boiling around them. Otto called him unworthy, a pretender in a mask meant for another man. Harry nearly drowned in that fight, saved only by will, and a final, desperate move that sent Otto to the bottom of the river, reactor in tow. The tabloids painted Harry as reckless. J. Jonah Jameson called him a spoiled vigilante with a body count. He wore the words like armor. Year 3 was the breaking point. The Lizard's rampage had gutted Oscorp's reputation. Sandman's vengeance turned the city streets to deserts. And Peter Parker, the friend he had never truly stopped loving like a brother, had fallen in more ways than one. Desperation had driven Peter into the arms of Oscorp's energy experiments, and when the accident came, it didn't kill him, it remade him. Blue light in his veins, a hum in his voice. Electro, reborn. For weeks, they were enemies. Harry Spider-Man fought Peter's electricity in battles that tore through avenues and left the skyline cracked. But the rage couldn't hold. Somewhere between blows, between shouts of betrayal and loss, Harry found the brother in him again, and when Morlun came, the hunter from nowhere feeding on Spider-Men as if they were prey in his natural order, it was Peter Electro who stood shoulder to shoulder with him. The two of them, together, brought down the monster. The cost was heavy. Oscorp's last reactor destroyed, parts of Manhattan uninhabitable, hundreds displaced. But Morlun was dead. The city could breathe again, or so they thought. Months passed in uneasy quiet. Harry tried to rebuild Oscorp from the ashes, not as the weapon of his father, but as something that might stand for life instead of control. The suits on the board saw weakness. Investors fled. Some whispered that Oscorp should have died with Norman. Harry didn't have the energy to argue. When he wasn't at the tower, he was in the streets, patching the cracks in a city that had nearly fallen apart. He worked the small hours, swinging between skeletal cranes and scaffolds, pulling people from burning apartments, chasing down the lowlifes who thought the chaos had made the city theirs. Peter Electro kept his distance. He was still a hero. The city saw him that way now, maybe for the first time. But he operated in silence. No quips, no headlines. He repaired power grids with his bare hands. He stopped muggers in alleyways without leaving a mark. But Harry saw the toll. The man was fraying, his edges unraveling. He hadn't been the same since the rift opened. The wound in the air that had bled Morlun into their world. Harry couldn't forget that day. In the seconds before Morlun's death, space had folded in on itself. The light bent wrong, as if the sky had been stretched like film. There was a flash, not from Peter, not from him, and Morlun's body had collapsed into dust. He'd replayed the Oscorp security footage hundreds of times. 12 seconds survived before the surge burned the recording out. 12 seconds of a silhouette stepping through the rift. Tall, armored, wearing the mask of a Spider-Man, but wrong. Every movement was too precise, too deliberate, like a predator in a borrowed skin. The city moved on, but Harry couldn't. Something had stayed behind. He started noticing them at night, red lines high in the sky, like threads caught in moonlight. They weren't visible to the naked eye for more than a heartbeat, but when they were, they hummed in his bones. The first time he saw one, it was over the East River, stretching from the towers of Roosevelt Island into the black. The second time, it was over Oscorp itself. The third time, it was everywhere for the briefest flicker, before snapping out of existence like an elastic pulled too far. No one else seemed to notice, or maybe they didn't want to. The city was still scarred. The battle with Sandman had left an intersection near Midtown, hollowed out like a canyon. The docks where Lizard's final stand had ended were still slick, with stains that wouldn't wash away. In the alley behind the Bugle, there was a crater from one of Peter Electro's blasts. The brick melted into glass. The evidence of war was everywhere, if you looked. Harry did, every night, every patrol. And with each pass, the feeling in his chest deepened. Something was coming. Peter felt it too. Harry knew without asking. The way his old friend avoided him now wasn't avoidance out of anger. It was avoidance out of fear. Peter had been somewhere, seen something in the rift, and whatever it was, it had left a mark deeper than any wound. Sometimes Harry would catch a flicker of blue light from a distant rooftop and know it was him, just watching, and then gone again, swallowed by the dark. The quiet between them hurt worse than any fight. One night, Harry stood on the Oscorp rooftop, mask in hand, watching the skyline. Lightning forked above the city but didn't move, hanging there like a frozen photograph. It stayed for nearly a minute before winking out. He thought of his father's last words. He thought of Peter's face when they'd fought as enemies. He thought of the silhouette in the rift. And somewhere beyond that skyline, past the cracks in reality, and the memory of Morlun's scream, Something watched him back. Something smiled. The storm came without warning. It began as a low thrum in the bones of the city, too deep for sirens to register, too subtle for most to notice. The sky turned from steel to black in the space of a breath, clouds curling inward like the city was inside the lung of something enormous. Harry Osborn was already on the streets when it began, suited up, webbing a mugger to the side of a deli wall. He felt it before he saw it, the same bone-deep vibration as the red lines in the sky, only now amplified, bleeding into his teeth, rattling behind his eyes. Up above, the first tear appeared. It was thin at first, like a filament in the clouds, glowing faint red. It pulsed, widened, and then the sound came. A ripping that had no pitch, a silence dragged through metal. Lightning struck in slow motion around it, each bolt hanging in place like frozen veins. The air felt heavier. He couldn't breathe without forcing it. Then the smell hit him. Not ozone, but something older. A scent like paper burning in a locked room. It split wider. Something was on the other side. Harry moved fast, webbing upward, using the crane of a construction site to get closer. The tear hovered over the East River, low enough to cast a reflection in the water. The rip's edges bled faint colors, hints of skies that weren't his own. In its center, there was only darkness. He braced against the wind as it began to pull, not push, dragging air into itself like a reverse storm. Debris lifted off the rooftops below. Flyers, garbage bags, the loose door of a newsstand. And then, through the darkness, something stepped forward. It was Morlun. His coat was shredded, his pale skin cross-hatched with wounds that glowed faintly like embers. He stumbled through the rift like a man pulled half dead from a battlefield. Yet even in his ruin, the presence was the same. Ancient, regal, predator. His eyes locked on Harry, and in them there was no malice, only fear. Harry landed on the crane's highest point, suit clinging to the steel as the wind screamed. "How are you alive?" The words left his mouth before he could stop them. Morlun swayed, then steadied himself, his gaze darting back to the rift. "Run!" His voice was frayed, almost human. "He's coming." The rift flared behind him, light searing through the darkness. The wind became a roar. Harry's grip tightened. From the heart of the tear, another silhouette emerged. Taller than Harry, broader, moving with a precision that made the air feel heavier around him. The suit was a perversion of the one Peter had worn years ago. Red and black, armored at the joints, the spider emblem stretched long and jagged like claws. The mask was expressionless, eyes too narrow, and in the way it tilted its head, there was nothing of Peter Parker's warmth. Harry didn't need to ask who it was. He knew. The man in the suit stepped onto the tear's edge, as though it were solid ground. The rift behind him spat lightning into the river. He said nothing, just looked at Morlun, then at Harry. Morlun's composure cracked, just for a moment. "You don't understand what he is," he said, almost pleading. The figure moved forward, and Morlun, the predator who had stalked Harry through blood and fire, took a step back. Harry fired a webline toward the armored spider, but the line never reached him. A flicker of movement, and it burned away mid-air, disintegrated by heat that shouldn't have been there. The armored figure stepped past Morlun, not even glancing at him, and fixed his gaze on Harry. "Osborne," he said. The voice filtered through a metallic distortion, like several versions of Peter speaking at once, all slightly out of sync. "You weren't supposed to exist." Morlun moved to strike him, desperation overriding fear. But the figure caught him by the throat in a single motion. The grip didn't tighten. It didn't need to. The light in Morlun's eyes dimmed instantly, his body folding in on itself like paper set aflame. Within seconds, there was nothing but ash blowing into the rift. Harry froze, his breath loud in his own ears. The armored spider turned back toward the tear. A faint crackle echoed from the other side, a hum Harry knew too well. Blue electricity arced along the rift's edges, and then Peter stepped through. Not the Peter he'd just seen hours ago repairing power lines in Brooklyn. This was Peter Electro, jaw clenched, eyes on the armored figure. There was tension there, but not surprise. The armored spider looked at him and simply said, "Choose." Peter's gaze flickered to Harry. Something in his expression shifted. Not betrayal, not malice, but resignation. Slowly, without a word, he stepped to the armored figure's side. Harry's chest went tight. "Peter." The armored spider's hand rose in a casual gesture, and Peter's body lit with current. A bolt of blue-white lightning exploded from his hand, striking Harry square in the chest. The force tore through the suit, burning the spider emblem from it, and flung him from the crane into the darkness below. The last thing he saw before the East River swallowed him was the rift's ceiling shut. The armored spider, Peter Electro, and the unknown beyond, gone as if they'd never been. The city was silent again, and Harry Osborn's world had just begun to break. The river closed over him like a fist. The cold was immediate, alive, clawing at his lungs before he even had the breath to fight it. The impact had ripped the air from his body. The pain in his chest wasn't just from the lightning. It was from the burning absence where his heart should have been. Every movement sent a jagged pulse through his ribs, each one threatening to split him apart from the inside. His vision swam, light bleeding into darkness, darkness into nothing. The current was stronger than he'd expected, dragging him sideways into a spin. Somewhere in the murk above, fractured beams of light from the crane shimmered like dying stars. He reached out, fingers grazing something soft that dissolved instantly. Morlun's ashes, still drifting like shadows in the water. They clung to his glove for a moment before peeling away, swallowed by the current. The weight of the suit, heavy with water, began to pull him under faster. His mind flared with moments. Norman's face under the mask, Otto sinking into the river, Peter smiling like the weight of the world wasn't yet on him. Then the armored spider's voice cut through all of it. "You weren't supposed to exist." Somewhere deep inside, instinct took over. He fired a web line into the black above. It caught. His arm screamed with the strain, every muscle shaking, but the line held. Inch by inch, he hauled himself upward, breaking the surface in a violent gasp. The skyline was there, but it was wrong. Buildings leaned subtly, as if the river itself were tilting them. Streetlights flickered in rhythms that didn't match the wind, and the air carried a faint hum, like the world itself was running on damaged wiring. He clung to a rusted barge until the current eased enough for him to crawl onto its deck. His suit's chest plate was scorched open where Peter's lightning had struck. The fabric melted into jagged edges that bit into his skin. Each breath was an effort. The taste of iron thick in his mouth. He coughed once, and a black thread of blood trailed down his chin, disappearing into the river water pooled at his knees. The skyline shimmered again. This time it wasn't his vision. The Empire State flickered. For half a second, it wasn't there at all, replaced by a jagged black tower that looked like a twisted version of Oscorp's own. Then it snapped back. Across the water, traffic lights switched to colors Harry had never seen, cycling in patterns that felt almost deliberate. A helicopter hung in the air, as though caught mid-frame, its rotors frozen despite the wind. An incursion. He didn't have the word for it yet, but he could feel it in the marrow of his bones. The barrier between this world and somewhere else had cracked, and whatever had come through wasn't finished. The sound of metal scraping on stone pulled his attention to the pier. Something moved there, slow, dragging. He tried to stand, but his knees buckled. The figure stepped into the light. It was a Spider-Man. The suit was ripped to shreds. Colors faded almost to gray, one lens cracked and hanging loose. Blood ran from his side in a slow, steady drip. His mask sagged against his face, like it barely clung to him. He took a single staggering step toward Harry, before collapsing against the pier railing. Harry dragged himself forward, half crawling. The man turned his head just enough to meet Harry's eyes through the broken lens. His voice was barely a whisper, each word punctuated by the ragged pull of breath. He hunts us. Harry caught him by the shoulder. Who? The man coughed, a wet sound. Spider, but not him. Takes them all, villains, heroes, feeds them to the web. Harry's grip tightened. Peter Electro, he's with him. The dying spider's breath rattled. Then, he's already lost. His head fell forward. Whether he was unconscious or worse, Harry couldn't tell, but the silence that followed was heavier than the storm. In the distance, the skyline shimmered again, this time longer, as though the city couldn't decide which version of itself to be. Harry looked back toward the river. The rift was gone, so were they. The armored spider, Peter, the 5 other figures he'd barely glimpsed through the lightning, all gone. And with them, any certainty about the rules of the world he'd been protecting. He was alone now, alone in a city beginning to fracture. The wind shifted, carrying a faint sound from somewhere deep in the streets. Not sirens, not traffic, but the slow, deliberate creak of something pulling itself through the dark. The hunt had already begun. Harry moved through the city like a shadow with a limp. Every step was a negotiation with the pain in his ribs, each breath dragging fire through his lungs. He'd stashed the half-dead Spider-Man he'd pulled from the pier in an abandoned Oscorp R&D lab, sealing the place with security codes no one else alive could override. The man had remained unconscious, murmuring now and then, words about webs and hunters that tangled in his fevered breath. Harry didn't know if he'd wake up again, and right now, he didn't have time to find out. The streets weren't right. That was the first thing. Storefronts shifted colors when you weren't looking at them directly. Park benches disappeared between blinks. A school bus idled at an intersection, but inside it, every seat was empty except for a single crumpled Spider-Man mask pressed against the glass. Traffic patterns looped like broken film. A red sedan turning the same corner over and over, driver's face frozen in an expression halfway between panic and scream. Harry's damaged suit felt heavier the longer he stayed in the open. Its systems were glitching, the mask HUD stuttering between readings like it couldn't decide which version of reality to measure. Every so often a web line would misfire, not from a jam, but because the air itself seemed to bend away from it. Then came the sound. At first it was faint, the low metallic grind of something dragging against concrete. It echoed through the alleyways in uneven bursts, like footsteps that didn't care about being heard. Harry followed the sound, weaving through warped streets until he reached the edge of the old garment district. The buildings here were older, brick-faced, their windows dark, but something in the air felt wrong. The street lamps burned brighter than they should, casting hard shadows that didn't line up with their owners. He saw movement. A figure emerged from the mouth of an alley, dragging a length of chain behind him. The body was massive, shoulders like slabs of stone. The black bulk of his form broken only by jagged streaks of white across the chest. The head tilted and Harry saw the grin. Not a mouth, not teeth, but the curved white crescent of the venom symbol, its edges twitching like it was alive. It wasn't his venom. The posture was wrong. The skin shimmered faintly, almost metallic, with a texture like oil swirling in water. A variant. The creature stopped in the middle of the street, chain clattering to the ground. The voice that came from it was low, guttural, and impossibly deep. This world smells new. Harry's heart pounded. He'd faced venom before, but this was different, heavier, more deliberate. You're not from here. The grin widened. No. And soon, neither will you. Before Harry could move, venom surged forward, faster than his size suggested, the chain snapping like a whip as it came around. Harry dodged left, webbing toward a fire escape, but the metal rung under his hand dissolved into sand the moment he touched it, collapsing to the street below. Incursion effect. He had no stable ground here. Venom hit him mid-air, the two of them slamming through the side of an abandoned storefront. Glass exploded inward. They tumbled across the tile floor, Harry landing hard on his shoulder. His suit's warning system screamed in his ear. Micro tears, joint damage, electrical instability from the lightning wound. Venom loomed over him, head cocking to one side, studying him like prey. The hunter said you'd be weak. Harry's mind flashed to the armored spider, to Peter standing beside him. His stomach turned. He sent you. The grin twitched. He owns us. The chain came down again, sparks flying as it tore into the floor. Harry rolled, webbing the creature's leg and pulling with everything left in him. Venom barely shifted. With a casual flick, the symbiote detached the webbing from itself, the line shriveling in midair like something alive recoiling from a predator. Harry's eyes darted around the store searching for an advantage. The shelves were empty, dust thick enough to choke. A rusted fire extinguisher sat in the corner, useless against something like this. The only thing left was the exposed power conduit running along the wall. Venom lunged. Harry fired a line past him, hitting the conduit. Electricity burst in a shower of sparks. The creature recoiled, more from surprise than pain, the symbiote's surface rippling violently. Harry used the moment to drive a kick into its midsection, sending it stumbling backward into the street. But instead of chasing, Venom stopped, standing in the middle of the warped road. His head turned as if listening to something Harry couldn't hear. Then, without another word, he stepped backward into the mouth of another rift that had opened silently behind him. The tears sealed shut. The street was empty. Harry stood there, chest heaving, the hiss of the damaged conduit echoing in the quiet. Somewhere far away, lightning split the sky in a perfect vertical line. And for just a heartbeat, he saw Peter Electro silhouetted in it, watching. The city was unraveling. It wasn't just the flickers anymore. The slow bleed of alternate realities brushing against his own. Now entire blocks were becoming wrong. Whole streets folded in on themselves like paper creased the wrong way. Street lamps bent toward invisible horizons, and people vanished mid-step, leaving nothing but the echo of a breath in cold air. Harry moved through the chaos with no clear destination. His mask's HUD now stuttered constantly, readings spiking into impossible numbers before resetting into static. The Osborne-built systems had been calibrated for physics as they knew it, not this. His web shooters misfired unpredictably, strands veering toward shapes in the air he couldn't see. Every few minutes there was another vibration, deep in the bones of the city. Each one left him more convinced these weren't random breaches. This was infrastructure damage. Someone was cutting through the world's foundations like wire. He found proof in Midtown. The old Oscorp energy exchange had been condemned for years. its shell gutted by the same explosion that had turned Peter into Electro. But now the building was lit from within, not by normal light, but by something blue, sharp, and alive. Harry crept closer, perching in the shadow of an adjacent rooftop. Inside, the light pulsed in slow waves. Figures moved in it. He zoomed in. Peter Electro was there. The sight landed in his chest like a punch. His old friend stood inside the main chamber. His body lit with arcs of energy, feeding into a crude, circular frame at the center of the room. The machine was wrong. A jagged ring of scavenged Oscorp tech welded together with parts Harry didn't recognize, shimmering with a geometry that hurt to look at too long. It hummed with the same pulse as the rifts. Peter wasn't alone. From the shadows, the armored spider stepped forward, the red-black plating catching the light like wet stone. Behind him, 5 others emerged, forming a semicircle around the machine. Harry's breath caught. He recognized some of them. Others, he didn't. A hobgoblin variant in scorched armor, mask cracked and jaw visible beneath, eyes glowing an unnatural gold. The venom he'd faced in the garment district, black hide rippling like oil. A Sandman whose body was jagged, crystalline, each grain cutting the air like glass dust. A Doc Ock with mechanical limbs that were living metal, their surfaces shifting like serpents. And Peter Electro, his Peter, standing among them like one of the pack. Harry's fists clenched. He wanted to burst through the glass, tear Peter away from them, demand answers. But something in the way Peter's stance shifted stopped him. The others stood relaxed, confident. Peter's posture was coiled, tense, every movement precise. His eyes, when they flicked toward the armored spider, held no trust. Inside, the armored spider spoke, voice low, metallic, vibrating through the chamber. Each breach weakens the weave. Every kill strengthens it. You've seen the threads, Osborne, but you haven't seen where they lead. Peter's eyes shifted toward the energy ring, then toward the hobgoblin, then back. A pattern. Subtle. Calculating. Harry didn't hear the rest. A vibration rolled through the city like a bass note, louder than before. The rooftop beneath him groaned, metal struts bending slightly under a pressure that came from nowhere. In the chamber below, the machine flared, a thin vertical tear forming in its center. The armored spider stepped closer, reaching toward it. The tear widened, and through it, Harry glimpsed something impossible. A cityscape made of webbing, towers strung from threads that stretched into infinity, each structure hanging in an endless dark. And in that dark, something vast moved, watching, waiting. Peter stepped forward then, his hand brushing one of the machine's control panels. For a moment, the power dipped, subtle, almost unnoticeable. Almost. Harry's eyes narrowed. Peter Electro wasn't just standing with them, he was working inside the enemy's machine. Before Harry could act, the armored spider's head turned, directly toward the rooftop where Harry crouched. Osborne, the voice carried perfectly, as if whispered in his ear. Come see your future. The rooftop groaned again, this time from weight. Harry spun. Sand poured from the air behind him, coalescing into the glass crystal form of the variant Sandman, his jagged arm already swinging. Harry moved on instinct, webbing a nearby girder and flinging himself off the roof just as the blow shattered the spot where he'd stood. Glass dust filled the air, burning his lungs, coating his visor. The Sandman followed, leaping across rooftops with impossible speed, each impact cracking the concrete beneath him. The chase tore through 3 blocks, Harry ducking between warped fire escapes and threads of red light that hung in the air like snares. Sand lashed out in whips, slicing brick and metal like paper. Harry's suit alarm screamed, one web shooter sputtering out completely. He had nothing left but speed and luck. Finally, he dove through a narrow alley where the walls bent slightly inward, the geometry wrong. Sandman surged in after him, and the walls closed. For just a moment, reality pinched, and the variant was gone, swallowed by a glitch in space. Harry staggered into the next street, chest heaving, heart pounding. Behind him, the alley was just an alley again. Somewhere above, lightning arced across the sky. Harry knew without seeing that Peter was still watching. By the third night since the rift over the East River, Manhattan no longer felt like a city. It felt like an island adrift between worlds, caught in a tide that pulled from all directions. The skyline was wrong half the time. Certain towers stretched too high. Others shrank into jagged ruins. Whole blocks would vanish for minutes before returning with minor, disturbing differences. Some had new street names. Some had shadows that didn't match the people casting them. Harry had stopped sleeping. Not out of choice, but because closing his eyes meant seeing the threads, not just in the sky now, but in his dreams, stretching into infinite dark, vibrating as if plucked by something enormous on the other end. The Oscorp R&D lab where he'd stashed the wounded Spider-Man variant had gone silent. When he'd checked earlier, the man's body was still there, but lighter somehow, as if parts of him had faded. That image haunted him more than he wanted to admit. He needed answers. That's how he found himself in the subway tunnels beneath Midtown, following a trail of distortion only his malfunctioning HUD could detect. The tunnels smelled like damp metal and burnt ozone. Graffiti on the walls shimmered faintly, shifting between tags from his world and others he didn't recognize. Stylized symbols of spiders, skulls, and names written in alphabets that bent the eye. He turned a corner and froze. At the far end of the tunnel, framed by a circle of pale light, stood the armored spider. The figure didn't move. His presence filled the space, made the air feel heavier. Harry's chest tightened. He could hear his own breath echoing in the tunnel, fast and uneven. "You've been watching me," Harry said, voice low, steadying it against the concrete walls. The figure tilted his head, slow and deliberate. "Not watching, measuring." The voice came layered again, like a chorus of Peter Parkers speaking in sync. "I wanted to see if you'd survive the first breach." Harry took a step forward. "Why bring this here? Why destroy my world?" "Your world?" The armored head turned slightly as if amused. "This one was never meant to be. You are an error in the weave, a thread that doesn't belong." Harry's hands curled into fists. "Then why not cut it? Why play games?" "Because errors can be useful," the armored spider said. "They draw attention away from the ones doing the real work." Behind him, something shifted in the shadows. A faint blue flicker. Harry's heart jolted. Peter. His old friend stepped into view, his expression unreadable in the tunnel's dim light. The arcs of electricity along his arms were muted, as though he were holding them back. His eyes flicked toward Harry just for a second, then back to the armored spider. Harry's pulse quickened. "Peter?" The armored spider raised a hand. "You have questions. You'll get answers when you've earned them. For now." He stepped closer, his height casting Harry in shadow. "You need to understand what you're standing against." The movement was sudden. Faster than Harry's eyes could track. One moment the armored spider was in front of him. The next Harry was slammed into the tunnel wall, the concrete cracking behind him. The blow sent a shock through his ribs, stealing his breath. Peter stepped forward, electricity flaring faintly at his fingertips. "He's not ready." The armored spider's head turned toward him. The silence between them felt heavier than any shout. Peter's hand dropped. The electricity faded. Harry forced himself to stay upright, leaning off the wall. If you think... The armored spider cut him off, voice low. I don't think, I know. And I know you're not the first Osborne to wear that mask, nor will you be the last to die in it. He stepped back into the shadows, Peter moving with him. The air shimmered faintly as the rift formed. Smaller here, but no less wrong. Before stepping through, Peter's eyes met Harry's again. This time, there was something in them. Regret, maybe, or warning. Then they were gone. The tunnel fell silent, save for the slow drip of water from the ceiling. Harry stood there, every muscle trembling. Not from fear, but from the certainty that the next time they met, one of them wouldn't walk away. The city was falling in on itself. Harry had been moving non-stop for the last 30 hours, chasing phantom signals through streets that no longer stayed the same long enough to map. His mask's filters barely kept the warped air from clawing at his lungs. The HUD was a mess, constant distortion, flickers of worlds overlaid on his own. Red skies that didn't belong here, skeletal towers webbed together, streets crawling with shapes that dissolved if you looked at them directly. But one signal had stayed consistent, the energy signature of the rift machine. It pulsed like a heartbeat through the chaos, a single constant in a city where nothing held still. Harry followed it into the financial district, down into the husk of an old underground freight terminal. The space was cavernous, concrete pillars vanishing into shadow above, the floor slick with water that reflected the faint red glow of a rift forming at the far end. The air was colder here, heavy, metallic. Every footstep echoed too long. He knew it was a trap, but he didn't turn back. From the dark between the pillars, the armored spider emerged. No army this time, no variants at his back. Just him, the jagged emblem, across his chest catching the rift's light. His movements slow, deliberate, predatory. You came alone, the voice layered in Peter's tones said, carrying effortlessly across the chamber. Harry's fists clenched. That's how you want it, isn't it? The figure stopped a few meters away, head tilting. I want you to understand, before the end, Harry's breath fogged the air. I already understand. You're not Peter. You're not my Spider-Man. You're just... The punch came without warning. Harry didn't see the movement, only felt the impact. A sledgehammer blow to the gut that folded him in half and sent him skidding across the slick floor. He hit a pillar, the force rattling his bones. The armored spider didn't rush. He walked, each step echoing like a clock counting down. I've seen hundreds of you. Different faces, different choices. You all fall the same way. Harry forced himself up, chest heaving, ribs screaming in protest. He fired a rapid volley of web lines, anchoring them to the ceiling and yanking, trying to swing in with momentum. The figure caught him mid-arc, one hand clamped around his throat, slamming him into the nearest pillar hard enough to crater the concrete. I fought him, the voice said. One of the Peters in that chorus spiking louder. You're Peter. Before the bite, after the bite, I broke him in ways you can't imagine. Harry's vision swam. He drove both feet into the figure's chest, kicking free, landing on the floor in a crouch. His muscles burned with the effort. Then you didn't fight hard enough. He lunged, a flurry of blows, punches, kicks, every ounce of technique he'd honed since the spider bite. Esidas da netsum. Each one blocked, parried, or countered. The armored spider moved with surgical precision, letting Harry expend himself before striking back. A hook to the ribs, a knee to the gut, a hammering elbow to the back of the neck that sent Harry sprawling into the water. You're already broken, the voice said, calm, absolute. You just haven't stopped moving yet. Harry struggled to push himself up, palms slipping in the water. Every breath was a knife. His mind flashed back into Norman's blood on the glider, Otto's scream in the river, Eddie's voice before Venom swallowed it, Peter's laugh in the days before the city had known a Spider-Man at all. He rose. The armored spider tilted his eye head. Osborne, stay down. Harry spat blood into the water. Not today. He charged. The two collided in a shock of motion, a flurry of impacts that cracked the pillars around them. Harry landed a punch to the jaw, another to the chest, but each one cost him, the armored plating absorbing the worst of it. The return strikes were worse, each one placed to cripple, to dismantle. A final blow to the chest sent Harry flying into a steel support beam. He hit and slid to the floor, suit scorched, breathing ragged. The armored spider stood over him, silent for a long moment. Then, when the weave unravels, this world will die screaming, and you'll remember that you could have walked away. He turned and walked toward the rift. From its light, a silhouette appeared. Peter Electro, his face unreadable. His eyes flicked to Harry. Just for a moment, the current along his arm flared. Not aimed, but enough to say, "I'm still here." Then the two stepped through. The rift sealed. Harry lay there in the cold water, the sound of the city's death throes echoing in the distance, and knew that the next time they met it wouldn't end the same way. Harry didn't remember leaving the freight terminal. The hours after the fight with the armored spider blurred into a haze of pain, the ringing in his head never stopping, his legs moving on instinct more than will. When he came to his senses, he was in the shadow of the Queensboro Bridge. The water below churning with colors that didn't belong. Deep crimsons and pale greens swirling like oil, shifting with each ripple. The city above him had gotten worse. Whole buildings hung in midair, disconnected from their foundations, held by strands of light that led upward into nothing. Cars drove themselves in slow circles, their drivers gone. The air buzzed faintly like a radio caught between stations. Somewhere in that chaos, he'd made a choice. He couldn't beat the armored spider alone. Couldn't even reach him without tearing himself apart. But there were others. He'd heard the dying words of the Spider-Man variant he'd tried to save. He hunts us. That meant more were out there. If the evil Spider-Man could hunt them, Harry could find them first. The first was easy to track because he left bodies. The Raimi Spider-Man in the Alex Ross-style black and red suit was a ghost story, even in his own world. This one didn't pull punches. Harry found him in the wreckage of a police blockade, the air thick with cordite and smoke. His suit was darker than Harry's, the deep crimson webbing etched into black fabric that seemed to drink the light. His lenses were narrow, predatory. A man in gang colors hung from a web line nearby, throat slashed clean. Harry landed 10 feet away. The other spider turned slowly, no startle, no tension. Just a hunter, sizing up another predator. "You're not from here," Harry said. "Neither are you," came the flat reply. They didn't shake hands, but the killer spider followed when Harry turned away. That was enough. The second was harder. The alternate human spider from 2002. His world had branched the night of the wrestling match. He'd lost, not his life, but his will. The costume was crude, barely changed from that first night in the ring, but his movements were sharp, almost desperate, like a man forever trying to win the match that had defined him. Harry found him in an abandoned gym, pummeling a heavy bag until it burst, sand spilling like blood. When Harry told him about the hunt, he didn't hesitate. "I've been waiting for a fight worth showing up to." The third wore the MK1 armor, and you bulky, plated, gleaming silver under the fractured sky. He moved with the confidence of someone who had never been broken by loss. His Uncle Ben was still alive, and it showed. His morality was intact, unscarred. That made Harry uneasy, but his power and tech were undeniable. The fourth was the strangest, a Harry Osborn from another world. The same gaunt features, but twisted by mutation. 6 arms, each tipped with claws, eyes larger and darker than they should be. His voice was the same, though dry, almost mocking, when he asked, "So in your world, you got the suit and the friends? I got the blood, and, well, this." Harry didn't tell him he looked like something out of a nightmare. He just nodded. "I need you." Others joined along the way. A noir Spider-Man whose trench coat trailed smoke in the air. A battered, limping Spider-Woman from a world where Norman Osborn was the hero and Peter had died a villain. A teenage Spider-Man in a torn varsity jacket, carrying a baseball bat wrapped in webbing. Each had their own scars, their own grudges. By the time they reached the ruins of an abandoned Oscorp shipping depot, there were 9 of them. Harry looked around at the mismatched group, killers, idealists, freaks, and broken men, and wondered if this was enough to face someone who had already torn through the worlds. Above them, the sky split briefly, revealing the webbed city in the dark. And for the first time, Harry thought he saw movement between the threads. Something vast, pulling them tighter. The Oscorp shipping depot was a ruin of rust and shadows, its massive hangar doors long frozen in place, half open like a mouth caught mid-scream. Inside, Harry's new team moved like strangers in the same room, each keeping to their own corner. The Raimi Alex Ross Spider-Man crouched high on a beam, his eyes on everyone below, his silence thick with judgment. The failed wrestler human spider paced in tight circles, cracking his knuckles like he was waiting for a bell to ring. The MK1 armored spider worked on calibrating his wrist launchers, the clink of tools the only steady sound in the room. 6-armed Harry sat upside down in the shadows of the rafters, 4 extra limbs moving idly, tapping the beam in a rhythm that made the others uneasy. Harry tried to address them, laying out what little they knew about the rift machine and the evil spider's movements, but it felt like talking to a firing squad, everyone armed, no one fully listening. The noir Spider-Man leaned against a pillar, flipping a coin. Spider-Woman stared at the floor, lost in her own broken world. The varsity jacket kid bounced on his heels, like he was seconds from running headfirst into whatever came next. They weren't a team. They were a powder keg. And then the air changed. A vibration rolled through the depot, deep and bone heavy. Dust shook loose from the rafters. The floor lights, ones Harry hadn't even noticed were still working, flickered red. The MK1 spider looked up sharply. "That's not an incursion. That's..." The wall exploded inward. The hobgoblin variant came through first, eyes glowing gold behind his shattered mask, fire trailing from the ends of his scorched armor. Behind him, Venom's bulk filled the breach, chain dragging across the concrete. Sandman poured in after his crystalline body, throwing fractured light across the walls. And then, the armored spider stepping through the dust cloud like a shadow made solid. Harry's stomach dropped. They hadn't come to scout. They'd come to end it. "Scatter!" Harry shouted. But it was already chaos. Venom charged the MK1 spider, the two slamming into a steel container hard enough to dent it inwards. Hobgoblin's pumpkin bombs turned the upper rafters into fire, forcing 6-armed Harry to drop down into the fray, claws flashing. Sandman swept through the center of the room, his glass-sharp limbs cutting through web lines like paper. And in the middle of it all, Peter Electro appeared, lightning crackling around his arms, his face unreadable. He blasted a path through Sandman toward Harry, the arcs hitting just close enough to miss. Harry met his eyes. Peter, the armored spider's voice, cut across the fight. Electro, end him. Time slowed for a heartbeat. Peter's jaw tightened. His gaze lingered on Harry, long enough for both of them to know the truth neither could say. Then he turned, lightning surging, not toward Harry, but toward Venom blasting the symbiote off the MK1 spider, just long enough for him to breathe. It was a crack in the armor, small, dangerous. The armored spider saw it. In a blur, he was on Peter, hand clamped around his throat, voice low and deadly. Do not mistake survival for loyalty. Then he flung Peter aside like he weighed nothing, turning his full attention to Harry. The fight was unlike anything Harry had faced. No flurry, no wasted motion, just methodical dismantling. Every block opened him to another blow. Every counter was caught, turned, punished. The other spiders were busy, too far to help. Harry's ribs screamed with each breath. His suit tore in jagged strips. Finally, a lightning bolt, Peter's, slammed into Harry's chest. Not full strength, not enough to kill, but enough to drop him. Harry hit the ground hard, vision tunneling. Through the haze, he saw Peter's face, caught for a split second in something like apology. The armored spider stepped over Harry, the rift opening behind him. This world falls next, he said almost casually. You'll watch it happen. Then they were gone. Him, Peter, and the villains swallowed by the rift. Harry lay in the wreckage, the roof groaning above him, the sounds of the others slowly drawing near. He'd failed to stop them. The city was breaking, and the war for the multiverse had only just begun. And that is going to be it for What If Harry Osborn Got Bit by the Spider, whether we call it The Return or Part 7. This is the finale, and now we've pushed Harry Osborn's Spider-Man into the Spider Wars, a very big Spider-Verse event that is happening here on the YouTube channel. And first, I want to say we have brand new classic Spider Week merchandise. It's back in the shop, designs from 2018, 2019, and all new What If variants have returned, but only for limited time. So every dollar made goes directly towards funding our motion comic episodes, and we got big ones coming out. So again, do make sure to subscribe, like, share, and turn those notifications on so you and your friends are all up to date with the latest content. But anyways, as always, have a fantastic day. Peace out.